Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto.
Hello, everybody. Did you know that Satoshi was blessed by Jesus? I didn't know that until recently, but it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, we have a lot of problems in our world, and people are all over the place, and it's very hard to find a moment of hope. And for me, when I found Bitcoin, it was like, oh, wow, this is something that can actually help the world. And to our guest today, Julia Tourianski, who's been on the Tatiana Show before, she and some other crypto colleagues got together and they wrote a book about God and Bitcoin, which I feel like I started out a little bit silly, but it is kind of an interesting topic, right? Is the money the root of all evil? And, other things like that. We're going to find out what they exactly tackled in the book. Thank you so much, Julia, for joining us today on the Tatiana Show.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Nice to be back.
Excellent. So I want to give people a little bit of a preface, because you've been involved in the crypto community for a really long time. And you started out, with these crazy videos with guns and stuff and just being very anarchist and wild. And now you've changed things over. You are, a family woman. You're very focused on your home. I think that's really nice. And I've seen you embrace your religion a lot more. You don't seem to make as many angry videos. Now you're making videos about tea and stuff. So I'm a person that didn't grow up with any kind of real religious enforcement. I got my communion. I'm Roman Catholic. I'm Polish, right? And Italian. So anyway, but I didn't really think that much about Jesus. And I think it's a question that a lot of people have more broadly. And with Christmas coming up, I think, especially with such a challenging year, people maybe should be bringing back the Christ in Christmas. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your journey, and we'll get into the book. But if you wouldn't mind telling me a little bit about how you have, I guess you are always committed to God, but more interested in that subject.
I wasn't always committed to God. I was an atheist for 20 years, like an edgy, God, Jesus hating atheist. And I was just really, I wasn't informed very well. And there was a lot of propaganda during my generation that I bought up as some sort of signal of independence. I don't need anybody. I don't need God to be a good person. And it's these kind of blanket dumb statements. And I was so anti-religious that I actually took Christian theology in university so that I could own the dumb Christians. And actually, some seeds were planted in my mind in those classes. Interestingly, not by the teachers, because most of the teachers were atheists. University, yes. And the Catholics there were very well informed. They were some of the most intelligent people I've ever met. And they were well informed on many subjects, including religion. So those seeds were planted while I was trying to not be religious. And then after being an atheist and an ANCAP libertarian and participating in all of that, and just looking around and seeing at all the immoral behavior around me, and these people, had their moral code, their non-aggression principle, blah, 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 all of that. But the problem with that is you can just kind of change it whenever you want. Oh, that's not aggression, or that's aggression. And you can, it's not objective. It's very subjective because it's human made. So that was a problem. And then I realized that you can't really have objective morality without an objective moral giver, which is the Almighty God. And that's not to say that you can't be a moral person without being a Christian or religious. That's actually two different things. But you can't actually know if you're being a moral person. You can live a really moral life and be a perfect person, be almost a perfect person. But that doesn't mean it doesn't mean that you need religion to be moral, but you cannot have objective morality without an objective moral giver. So you need that you need that rule set that is unchanging. Now, obviously, you can argue that there's so many sects of Christianity and the rules change all the time, but That's why I'm Orthodox. Those rules haven't changed since the first century. So yeah, Protestantism obviously has many, many, many flaws because it's everybody interpreting the Bible for themselves. But that's my rant about religion. And so I went, there were 3 things that changed me, and that's the objective morality issue, the issue of existence, like where did the world come from, and even some of the biggest assumed atheists and scientists question that and say things like the more we look at the world, the less material it seems, or the less likely it seems that it came from chaos. So chaos through, and then random chance from chaos. So it doesn't make sense to even people that are still atheists and are in the field of study of chemistry, biology, evolution, physics. So if anyone's interested about these kind of things, like I can ramble on about this. I'm just rambling right now, but
I want you to ramble. I'm enjoying your rambling. Keep going. I mean, what do you think is, do you think that anybody has access to religion? Or to God? Do you think that I think one of the problems when people think of Christianity is that it's excluding other people from joining, right?
Well,
and so
that's historically illiterate, because Christianity is the first religion, especially when you look at Judaism. It's the first inclusionary religion, completely all-encompassing. You don't have to be born in it. You just, all you have to do is accept the grace of God, and then follow Jesus through your work and through your mind, like through your everyday life and through the things you do and through your belief. Anyone can do that. That's accessible to anybody. People in countries where they didn't have access to the concept of Christianity have had visions of Christ and saints come to them and give them the insight into God. So it's completely inclusive, unlike the big religions such as Judaism and even Buddhism. Some people don't say that it's a religion, but it is a religious framework nonetheless. And in Buddhism, for example, you have to be a man to reach nirvana. Like, it's inherently sexist, like actually sexist. Like you have to be born a man, and then that's the only way you can be enlightened. Christianity is the first religion that actually gives everyone the option to reach apotheosis. Like, you're not excluded from it. It depends on you.
Do you feel like, I feel like reading the Bible, this is going to sound kind of like silly, but I feel like it's very boring. I've never really tried, but anytime that I was in Christian school or whatever, they would be reading something and I would be falling asleep in class. Like, it was not interesting to me. And I think part of that is the language that's used. And I always thought to myself, well, maybe if they made the language a little bit better, that would be good. But a few months ago, I ran into a priest, and I call him woke priest because he was like woke, but in a real sense, not like, oh, woke, like fake. And he is a priest in New Jersey, and he teaches the Latin Mass. And he was fighting with Governor Murphy because of the lockdowns and because he wants to express, our God-given right to worship or whatever, right? So he started suing the governor, which I thought was really great. And he told me that he watched all this alternative stuff, and it was really a neat conversation. And at the end, when he mentioned that he did the Latin Mass, it was because the language was bastardized when they created versions of the Bible in other different languages. And that was an opportunity for political manipulation. You sort of touched on that a little bit. How do you find, what do you think about the language used in the Bible, and how would somebody even want to read it? Because it seems really old folk language, and I just have never really taken much inspiration from it.
Well, first of all, I think that like most atheists are created at Sunday school, where teachers make the Bible and religion really boring and can't answer basic questions and say dumb stuff. That's not true. So that needs to be changed. And you don't actually even have to be illiterate to be Christian. You don't have to read the Bible, because like with Orthodoxy, like nothing was changed. Like you have the creeds, you have like the Nicene creeds, and you have the church fathers meeting over centuries to make very careful decisions about what is valid and invalid. And that's not just like cherry picking or just like deciding things on a whim. They're looking at historical documents and making sure that they're valid and making sure the wording and the interpretation is as accurate as they can make it. So, and then like if you're reading it for yourself and you have no historical context or anything, then that's where you get the whole problem with Protestantism. And actually Catholicism since the 50s has this problem as well. They actually started acting and doing things in the Protestant direction. So it's just like called chaos theology, where everyone's interpreting the Bible for themselves. And then there's the different versions of the Bible, obviously different translations and languages, and no one puts anything into context because not everyone is a scholar that can do that. So that's why it's important to not disattach like the Bible and having like your personal faith from tradition. This is why people need to go to a church that's valid and to participate in the rites and the ceremony and the tradition, because it's not just random. It's not just like, they're not just like doing stuff willy-nilly. There's deep cultural and, significant Christian reasons for what they're doing at church. So yeah. I think the Bible is great to read if, read it in small amounts and read the most interesting parts if you do want to do that. But it's actually not like you can still be a Christian without enjoying reading the Bible, although I recommend you do try to read it a little bit.
Okay, so I'm not going to fully just force you to talk about Christianity the whole time. I will bring it back to Bitcoin, but I have questions I'm always thinking about. What do you think about heaven? And I think, all right, so what I dislike about the idea of Christianity, because maybe throughout my whole life, there's like an interest, and on some level, I love God and stuff like that. But, there's some skepticism going on. So one of the things that I found really difficult around the concept of God is that he's not going to let people into heaven unless they believe in him. And that seems really arrogant and mean and cruel. Like my grandmother, for example, was not a particularly religious person, but I loved her. I thought she was a good person. I don't think she deserves to belong in hell. And I kind of find it a turnoff that Jesus or God would require people to swear their fealty to him, or they burn in an eternal pit of fire. And I think this is a turnoff for a lot of different people. What do you think about that?
So I think that's like a dualist misconception. From what I understand so far, and there's a great scholar, N.T. Wright, and I don't know, I might get in trouble from my Orthodox friends for this because he's not Orthodox, but he is a very, very respected New Testament scholar. And the way he explains it is like, you don't go to hell for not believing in God. You just have true death. So basically, when grandma dies, whether she's a Christian or not, she's dead. And then when the second coming happens, that's when the judgment occurs and she goes to heaven, hell, or just stays dead. That's how I understand it. So it's not like if a baby is born and not baptized yet and has no opportunity to believe in God, of course, he's not sending the baby to hell. Now, there are Protestants that believe this. Like, I've met them, and they say, if you abort your baby's burning in hell forever. And it's like, no. And Orthodoxy doesn't teach that either. So there's a lot of things that I just leave up to mystery and my faith in God. And there's nothing in the Bible that indicates that if just for not believing in him, that you burn in hell.
Well, that's very comforting. I'm very happy to hear that. Because I would like to see people after the fact. Do you think that there's a heaven? I mean, what do you think is going to happen when we die?
Yeah, I'm kind of, from what I've understood, it's not an immediate thing. Like, it's something, so we're working for the kingdom of heaven here on earth. We're working for apotheosis and to become godlike. and you can achieve it to some degree. And, some of the monks and saints do this, and they become one with God, and they're guaranteed the salvation. So, but like, I don't believe it is clear that as soon as you die, you go to heaven or hell. Like, I think it's implied that it's after the second coming. And I'd have to look at what Orthodoxy teaches specifically, but that's the beautiful thing about Orthodoxy. It actually leaves a lot to mystery, because God is a mystery. There's a lot of mysterious things, and they don't claim to know every single little thing. So that's also something I try to stay away from. If scholars are like, no, it's like this for sure because of this one sentence in the Bible, that to me gives a lot of red flags, because it's such a vast book and it's all within context of each other. So yeah, I don't know. Yes, I believe there's a heaven eventually.
Oh, I hope so. I feel like it sounds like a good time. And I would like, I feel like it's a very strikingly sorrowful thing throughout my life when I think about people dying. Like, I could talk about my grandmother and easily start crying in a second. And she's been gone for 4 years. Like, so when I think about life, and I just think about the magnitude of the fact that we're all going to die, and every single person that you love is all going to die, even the kids, everybody's going to die. I mean, it's so overwhelming. I like the idea of heaven, but I'm not 100% sold. I would like that to be a thing, because I don't know. I just would love to be reunited with those people.
Well, it is one of the tenet beliefs of Christianity. So
what?
Heaven, you might want to get on board in some respect.
No, I'm down with that. Yeah. This sounds good. Sign me up.
One of the problem, COVID is a good example. Because people are so not religious and so not in tune with God and so distant from God, they're so scared of dying. And okay, if you're a faithful Christian, you're not scared of death. Sorry, that's just one of the benefits of being Christian. You're not scared of death. That's not really that bad. There's way worse things than death. Way worse things. Imagine not dying. Imagine sitting in a concentration camp in chains and not being allowed to die.
Yeah, that wouldn't be great.
That sounds pretty bad. But the dying, yes, dying is not great, because in some respects, because then you can't benefit people on this planet, and etc. But at the same time, we're human beings, and we're gonna die. We're all gonna die, and it's something you have to accept and be okay with. And to accept it means you don't live a fearful life. And living in fear and in despair is actually incredibly anti-Christian. God specifically says, you're not allowed to despair.
Yeah, I think it's hard not to despair these days. And I think you bring up a good point. I mean, this year, one of the things that I find annoying about COVID is that people are trying to avoid death, completely maniacs. You know what I mean? It's almost like the id writ large or something, some kind of primal thing that people are experiencing on a global level. But I don't think that they're facing the fact that every single day when you leave your house, you could die. I had a headache before this interview. I could have a brain aneurysm. And I was literally just sitting around thinking that. I'm like, oh, I better work this out, and that
better be a good interview before I die.
Oh my gosh. Well, no, the last interview, but, I mean, I think it's hard to accept death, but I also think that people are being forced into it right now. Do you think that there is, an age of Aquarius or any kind of maybe more biblical, end of days or whatever going on right now? What do you think of that?
I think it's always going towards that direction. I think it's kind of cyclical. I think we're at a peak Rome time. We're falling. We're starting the free fall. And I think it's just going to get worse, especially for Christians. And it's always been like that. Christians have always been persecuted. So yeah, I mean, I'm not saying get used to it, but don't let it get you down, because that's just reality.
I find it very annoying that Christians are always getting the short side of the stick. Just as an aside, I think that, you mentioned Christians being persecuted. And I think that in America, people are always talking about different kinds of religions being persecuted, but for some reason I find it to be socially acceptable to make fun of Christians. And I've actually been sort of interested in this pursuit of having conversations with religious friends, even though I don't consider myself, I guess on some level I am religious, right? As long as I'm like exploring these ideas. But yeah, basically like it's interesting that that is the acceptable religion that you can make fun of. Or even look at the lady who was the African woman who was assigning people hydrochloroquine, and she was ridiculed for believing in demons. And, you know, a lot of people believe in demons. I just as an aside, I don't really care.
Meanwhile, Satanists are edgy and cool. They believe in
I'm
the
not sure why Satanists are okay. So yeah, it's funny to me how certain religions, you know, their suffering is justified. Then the other religions, you know, they get a special pass, and I don't like the special passes for anybody. But I do think that these are good questions to be asking.
Yeah, because I used to do that. I used to be the atheist that just mocked Christians and looked at the dumb Christians on YouTube and thought they were so dumb. And now whenever I see YouTube, like Fedora Atheist YouTube still doing that, like still cherry picking the most ridiculous Protestant preacher they could find, me like, oh, Christians are dumb. It's like, okay, that's the most childish argument I've ever seen. You can cherry pick an atheist, but go look at this dumb atheist. No one actually goes far enough to critique the specific doctrines and the validity of the Bible, and you know, the existence of Jesus and what happened on the cross. Like, people used to do this. Like, atheists used to be well educated, well versed men in Oxford and Cambridge who had atheist clubs. Many of them converted later because they actually were at an impasse and were convinced that Jesus did rise because of the historical data. So it's like not enough to just make fun of Christians anymore. Like, it's kind of old and worn, and get good arguments. Just get good arguments. Like, I haven't heard a good argument for years and years and years. I was an atheist for 20 years, and the arguments have not changed, and they haven't been won either. But yeah, I don't know. It's socially acceptable, I guess, because like America's a Christian nation, and like you're allowed to make fun of the majority, which we are not anymore. We're a minority again. So I don't know. It's rude and it's childish, and like, okay, if you do it, it kind of betrays your own lack of depth, in my opinion.
Yeah, I also find atheists to be somewhat miserable. Like, I don't like the fact that they're arrogantly declaring that they know that there is no God. Like, I don't know if there's a God, but if I'm going to bet, sure, go for God. Why would you want nothingness? You know what I mean? And so even though religion isn't that important to me specifically, let's say I'm like on a dating site or something, I see a guy that has atheist and I just swipe left. I'm like, this guy's miserable. He just has no reason to live anymore. And that's not true, because there's a lot of moral people that are atheists, but I just don't like the vibe. I'm like, you know what? Enough with you and your Jesus hating. I don't like it. I want to believe in something,
well,
even though I don't know what it is.
It's not the atheist thing that's turning you off. It's the fact that they're declaring, like, is this like that's something you have to declare on the app, or is it something they're just putting in their bio randomly?
No, some people, like, it's an option, but you can opt in or opt out of it.
Yeah.
So obviously by opting in, they're saying, by the way, I know Jesus and other gods are all fakers. There's nothing after you die.
I think that's what's turning you off more than the actual atheist part. Because it's like, okay, if you're an atheist, like, cool. Let's talk about it later. But like, why is it like front and center on as your personality? So I think that's what's probably the problem.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of problems in this world today. What do you think about Jordan Peterson? So Jordan Peterson has a biblical series. I'm curious to see if you've, listened to it at all. And so I have an interest in this series. I haven't gone through it yet, but one of the concepts in it that really kind of related to me was the idea that that these battles are infinite, right? And that the question of, is there a God, has not been thought significantly through enough by the atheists, because they're only looking at it on like the one level. Is there a God? Does he sit on this throne? Whatever. But he appears to relate it to more of these life cycles that we go through, these challenges that happen through the ages, the question of the meaning of life that kind of echoes through our souls as we go through this journey. How would you comment on Jordan Peterson's take? Have you seen it? Do you think that there's like a less like literal version of the Bible that people can believe in and still kind of fall into the right religious category for you?
Well, that depends what you mean by Jordan Peterson. I met Jordan Peterson and I've been to his lectures, and he's a very interesting person and he's got like a lot of presence. I think his lectures have helped a lot of previous atheists and agnostics to explore Christianity in the way they didn't think was possible or accessible. And I do wish he took more of a harder stance. And I can't tell whether it's because he doesn't want to lose his like non-believing audience, or whether he actually just doesn't know what he believes necessarily. He has said that he's very partial to orthodoxy. So I don't know, maybe I kind of predict that eventually Jordan will come around and just become Christian full out. But I don't really, like, that's my only criticism, that he hasn't really taken a strong stance. But that's kind of his thing. He's always managing these two planes. Like, he's always kind of stepping in and out and in the middle. And then that's what makes him so accessible to a lot of people. Because on the other hand, if he was like, I'm Orthodox now, a lot of people might have just dismissed him, that had that barrier to believing in God in such an intense way. But now that he's like so prominent, I don't think that's going to be an issue for people. Like, he's too big now for that to become an issue for people. So at the end of the day, I hope he's honest and he's following his heart, if I can say that and not be kitsch.
I like the kitsch. That's okay for me. One of the problems that I have with, you keep referencing orthodoxy and these traditional documents and whatnot. One of my problems with organized religion is that oftentimes, just like anyone with any kind of power, it is corrupted, right? What do you think about the influence of corrupt, power-hungry priests, etc., over the years, influencing the actual written documentation? Like, how do you feel about that?
Well, in Orthodoxy, they don't influence the written documentation. That's just not what happens.
Okay.
Like the dogma was established, and it hasn't changed really in any significant way. And like, dude, they had, I think, like a 5-year-long argument about whether they should be using leavened bread or not. Like, they take this stuff seriously. It's really hard to change dogma. And that's why when the Catholics changed the wording of the creed, like, there was a schism in part from that. So, and then the bigger problem was the Pope taking absolute authority. So in Orthodoxy, it's more of a distributed system. We have the main patriarch and all that, but like if like Patriarch Kirill in Moscow goes and says, for example, kids don't have gender and that's what God thinks, that's not going to be just accepted by Orthodoxy. Like, he's just going to be basically schismed out of the church. Like, you can't stray away from doctrine. So you go to any Orthodox church and the priest will have their sermon, but he won't be saying things that are in conflict with the established dogma of the Orthodox Church. Now, Catholicism has had way more of that because they went in the direction of Protestantism after the 50s. And there's actually a sect of Catholics who don't acknowledge any popes after, I believe, Pope Pius XII. I'm sorry, don't quote me on that. But one of the last pope was in the 50s for them. And then the sequential popes after him strayed away from the dogma of Catholicism so far that they aren't acknowledged by that sect of Catholics. Yeah. So and again, that's the problem with Protestantism. You can go to one church where, for example, like all gays are accepted and they're like really focusing on gays in the positive light. And then you go to another church where it's the opposite. They're focusing on gays in the negative light. And it's like, why are you focusing on this in the first place? That doesn't mean that that's what Christianity is.
Okay, I have a few questions that are mulling around in my head, but I want to stay with the Pope, right? I hung out with a friend the other day, and when you're Polish, everybody's like, "Oh, Jan Paweł, Pope John Paul," he's like a freaking celebrity in Poland. And I was like, "Who is this guy? I don't care about popes," and I'm generally mistrustful of any kind of organized religion. But recently, I heard that he was actually quite a good pope. He was supposedly did a really good job. So it's like, go Polska. And now we've got this other pope who is very socialist, essentially, and is pretty radical. Then they had the Nazi pope before him. So I'm not sure how that guy got in there. But talk to me about popes. What are your thoughts?
I don't acknowledge the pope to have any influence over my faith. I think I don't believe in the Pope having a standing. I don't believe in the Pope having any special power. And
why not?
Because I'm Orthodox.
So what? Orthodox people don't believe in any popes? There's no popes in Orthodoxy?
No, that was one of the main reasons for the schism. They do not believe in a single entity that is like the ruler of the religion, which is ultimately what the Pope did, and they were not following his kind of lead, and the power was concentrating in the West. So the East basically, decided to not do that, and there was the schism. And I agree with that. I don't think there's biblical standing to have a pope.
Okay, fair. Well, there's supposed to be an anti-pope and an antichrist hidden in the cloak of a pope. So
yeah, well, there's like my neighbor. He's a Seventh-day Adventist, and his whole thing is like the Pope is literally Satan. So there's Protestants that really take that to another level.
Okay, I'm curious about that level. But anyway. So should we talk about like Bitcoin and God? So we're breaking down, why religion in general a little bit, which is always just a more broad conversation, but to bring it a little bit down more specifically to Bitcoin. So tell me, how did you find Bitcoin and Christianity to be cohesive? Why do they complement one another? Why this book?
So a lot of people, especially Christians, don't like talking about money. They think it's kind of like an icky subject. But actually, the Bible mentions money over 2,000 times. And Jesus uses money in his parables more than any other comparative, subject. And so obviously, like it's not icky. It's just part of your everyday life. Like money is how you exchange value with people for your work and time. So shouldn't the money we use be moral and cohesive with our beliefs? And fiat money today especially does not meet those moral standards. Fiat money is printed and inflated and is debt, and that's theft. So that's literally stealing from people's time, which is their life. So like, to put it plainly, let's say you saved up $1 million for your retirement, and then like COVID happens, and Canada, let's say you live in Canada, printed the most money out of any country for like COVID welfare because they shut everything down for so long. And then like by next summer, your $1 million are only worth $500,000 because the currency is diluted so that it inflates. That's nice. Good job working your whole life really hard. Your government literally just stole from you by printing money. Guess what? Can't do that with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is inherently anti-theft, cannot inflate it. It's capped at 21 million. So just by that virtue alone, like that is a better system of money to use. And I would really encourage people to get into Bitcoin for that reason, not, not as a speculation or just like to hold and like get rich or something, or to worship it as a technology. Acknowledge that it's a good technology and that it's a good money, and acknowledge that it's way better than our fiat system of today. And it's way more pragmatic than gold, and gold can still be inflated, by the way. And then use it accordingly and make it part of your life to like try and avoid other types of monetary systems that exploit people, censor people, defraud people, etc.
I agree with the moral argument. I mean, when I heard about Bitcoin, I didn't really care. But when I started to think of it in terms of what it could do to change the world, especially as an anti-war tool, that's when I became really very interested in it. And I think that it's disheartening sometimes looking at the community, because I'm happy that it's growing. But I think that people sometimes lose that moral compass that brought a lot of us to Bitcoin. How do you guys tackle this in the book? Like, it's you, Jimmy Song, Gabe Higgins. I saw he contributed to the book. So tell me a little bit about like what that process was like and what exactly somebody can expect to get, which, by the way, I recommend if you guys are religious at all, this is a really good Christmas gift. So check it out. We're going to put the Amazon link. So I hope that people support Julia's work, and also, I don't know, maybe get their family into it. Maybe your family is like, oh, you like Jesus? You'll love Bitcoin.
Yeah, the book is specifically for people that are kind of like financially illiterate and don't know how money works and are kind of like interested in Bitcoin if I've heard of it. And then also if they're Christian, that helps because the framework is Christian oriented. But I have had non-Christian friends read it and they really liked it for its educational value about the history of money and how our current system is broken. So, and it's not a super long read. We try to be quite succinct. It's, it's meant as a good introductory piece of information for people that are trying to get their finances together and that want to do something apart from like the classic investments and the classic structures of the monetary system, because everybody knows that's broken. Like on some level and some subconscious level, everyone knows it's broken, but they just don't know where else to turn and they don't know what other options there are. And we present Bitcoin as like the most moral option and the best step forward.
How did you become interested in this specific project though? Like, were you and Jimmy and some people just sitting around being like, oh, I love Jesus, I love Bitcoin, why not combine the two?
Pretty much, like a bunch of guys, Jimmy, I believe, organized like a Bitcoin Bible group and invited me in. So that was fun. And we were reading some books that had to do with morality and finance. And we're all Bitcoiners. That's like the prerequisite. We have to be Christian and you have to be Bitcoiner. And then we would like talk about it from a Christian framework. And it was really fun. And then COVID hit and we got this email sent around and basically saying like we should do a book together about this topic. And I basically ignored the email because I'm like, I don't have time. I have 2 kids. And they were probably sending this to me just to be nice anyways. And then they reached out to me specifically in person after the email was sent, be like, hey, you're in, right? And I'm like, oh, I should probably do this. This sounds like it could be really good. And so we did. We did a book sprint, and Jimmy did this with the Little Bitcoin book. And that's been very successful. And he's like a very good leader and took it upon himself to like make sure this project happened. So shout out to Jimmy, and everyone else was wonderful in the project. So make sure to check out all the authors on the book. We're all listed on Amazon, except that function is broken on the phone. So look at it on your desktop. Like they only list 2 authors on the phone version. I don't know why, but yeah. Yeah, exactly. We like Bitcoin. We like Jesus, and we think like Bitcoin's more moral than anything else we have today. So live what you preach, right?
Earlier we had been talking a little bit, and I'd been flirting with a question of, in my experience, I think that there are a lot of Christians that are drawn to liberty and to Bitcoin. Do you think that that's true? Because I think that you had a little bit of pushback on there. I feel like I've gotten to know a lot more Christians and not the annoying ones that like, I don't know, I'm just thinking of somebody specifically that's very annoying. But, I've gotten exposed to a lot of different ideas, and I find that it's a very Christian philosophy, both the philosophy of liberty and Bitcoin. Why do you think it's attracting people? Like, are we bridging that gap?
I think, like, in its pure form, Christianity is very oriented in terms of, okay, freedom's like kind of a trigger word, right? Because Christianity isn't like about like indulgent like pursuits of happiness. Like, there's a lot of constrictions that Christianity puts on people, because the whole thing is, if you're like completely free, you'll be enslaved by your vices. So this is where like ANCAPs get it wrong. Like, oh, you only answer to yourself. And then it's like, well, I want to do heroin all day. I'm not hurting anyone. Yay. Whereas Christianity has a absolute objective moral framework that doesn't exclude doing things to yourself as as being bad. Like, this is why suicide is wrong. Like, you're not supposed to kill yourself if you're a Christian, because life is a gift from God and you're a child of God. And it's not your life to take, actually. So there's a lot of differences in like the libertarian ANCAP crowd and Christians, and there's like a lot of conflict with the general way we're supposed to live. But like speaking more generally, yes, in America, Christians tend to be more conservative and in the old-fashioned sense, and more independent in terms of like taking charge of their own lives. So you see that. But I will say that over time, Christianity has been kind of corrupted by socialist ideas and ideals. And you see this a lot in churches in the bigger cities. Like, they're following the politics and the culture instead of the dogma of the church. So it's really difficult to make that judgment right now. Like, a lot of Christians are just like flat out commies these days.
So you would disagree with the statement that some people would make that Jesus is the socialist because, look, he's giving out, loaves of bread.
Stupid.
Tell me why it's stupid. Make the argument for me.
First of all, the Bible and Jesus talk about how everyone is made with their own set of abilities and expectations. There's many parables that illustrate this. Like, there's the parable of the master and his like 3 servants, and he gives each servant an amount of money to invest and like keep for him while he's gone. And every servant gets the money to their own ability. They don't get the same amount of money. If they got the same amount of money, that would be socialism, because everyone's the same. Everyone's capable of whatever they put their mind to. The Bible teaches against this. The Bible teaches that God made everyone different. They're not less valuable, okay? They're different. And some people are capable of more than others. You get a certain amount of gifts. And some people get less gifts. Some people get more gifts. And he left different amounts of money for his servants, and the first 2 servants invested the money and tried to be fruitful and make something of the gift from the master. And the 3rd servant, who got the smallest amount, was like too scared and nervous and like didn't want to be held accountable, so he just like buried the money and didn't make any investment, good or bad. And the master was disappointed in him and like made that known, because he was just like, he totally wasted his opportunity. That's not a socialist concept. And I'm not just cherry picking. This is like a theme in the Bible. So, and also there's nothing in the Bible to like vilify money at like inherently. Like, money is not like inherently bad, and like rich people are not inherently bad. The point the Bible makes is, if you are rich, you're more susceptible to vices such as worshiping money and hoarding and all of that. And it's harder for you to let go of wealth because you have more wealth. And that's what he means when he says it's hard for rich people to get into heaven, because they have to give up a lot more, and their life is more of a struggle to be aligned with God. So if you're desolate and poor and like all you have is the church and your loaf of bread, it's pretty easy to be a sacrificial Christian in the worst sense of the word, because you have nothing to give up anyways. But if you have things to give up, that's difficult. So you're going to have a more difficult time to be one with Jesus. Yeah, that's not socialism. That's like, they need to read the Bible again.
What do you think of the concept of giving away all of your possessions? Do you think you could ever do that? Like, I always thought that seemed really stupid, but I don't know, maybe there's some kind of benefit from that. And it reminds me a little bit of what you said regarding the temptation being very high if you have a lot of resources. What do you think of that? Are you supposed to give it away and live like a monk?
Again, there's nothing that teaches that like everyone is supposed to do this one thing. Like, not everyone can be a desert father or a monk and give everything up and live a life that is that way. Like, some people live a life of solitude and reach apotheosis and are one with God, and that sacrifice is worthwhile to them because everything else is material and that doesn't matter at the end of the day. But at the same time, like, obviously not everyone can or will do that. Not everyone is capable of doing that or wants to do that. And no, I don't believe that you go to hell if you're not a monk or something. I think everyone has to work with their own capabilities and their own flaws. And I think I will say this, living a Christian life right now is probably harder than ever in history before, because we have so much abundance and we are so ruled by the material. And I mean, look at the people who celebrate Christmas the biggest and grandest way. They're always atheists. Every atheist I know, Christmas is like, oh my God, Christmas. Oh my God. They're so obsessed with Christmas, and it's very material oriented because they have nothing else. That is what their life revolves around. Like, oh, I got the newest Ray-Bans. I got the newest this. It's crazy. And I mean, I'm like this to an extent, not to the extent of some people, but I get it. And I get how easy it is to slip into that. But at the end of the day, like, it's so meaningless. Look at how depressed and suicidal everyone is. And they have so much abundance of stuff. So it's hard. Like, I mean, it's hard to be a Christian when things are so good.
Well, I guess that's a good problem to have. I don't know. I think about, these rich people and they're all sad and depressed and stuff. And I don't understand why they don't just try and do nice things for other people, because that's like a real quick cure for depression. If you can't manage to do something for yourself, you can try to help those that are less fortunate. And that'll give you a quick jolt of gratitude.
A lot of them do. I think the ones that do it and are Christian or have those sentiments, they just don't talk about it. Like, it's actually a sin to talk about how charitable you are. Like, if I sat here and said, I give this much away, like, that's a sin. Jesus literally says that, like, giving things away and being charitable is its own reward. Like, you're not supposed to talk about it. And I think some people take that to heart, and that's what they do. They do give a lot of things away and they don't talk about it. I have friends that aren't Christian that are like this, but I think they've been in the framework, or they're naturally that way, or they just don't know they're Christian yet. But then there's, honestly, like, the millionaires and celebrities that are the loudest about their environmental work and their charity and adopting kids if you're loud about that stuff, you're sinning and you're doing it for the completely wrong reasons, and that doesn't count. Sorry, if you gave away $1 million to the homeless and then, like, you had a parade for yourself about it, that's not good.
Yeah, I think that a lot of evil people get away with things by cloaking it in charity. And I think that
it's like the feminist rapist, right?
The what?
Like the feminist rapist. Yeah.
Oh,
I love women so much.
Okay, so I feel like we covered a lot of really good stuff. We didn't talk about family, which, you've really put a lot more time into, and that's a private subject, but I'm curious what's going on with your artwork. One of the cool things that I noticed about you, because, we were just friends or whatever, and then all of a sudden I saw all your art and I was like, holy crap, Julia's a really good artist. Because, sometimes you have a friend and they're an artist and they're not that great. And you're like, oh, it's really good. Like, you were really great. Thanks. And I like your Kia Lara thing that you had made a while back. It was really beautiful. Do you think that in the upcoming years, now you're putting a little bit of creativity into book writing, you're still doing the mom thing, you're doing some homesteading. Do you think that we're going to see a little bit more art out of you in the future?
Yeah, I'm going to get all the kids out as soon as I can. And then once they're a little older and I have more time, I'd love to start painting a lot more. And I think that's a nice thing for kids to see art around them. So yeah, that's just a matter of time, but I'm very low time preference. So like I can just foresee it happening and I'm looking forward to it.
Very good. Awesome. So as we wrap up, is there anything else that you want to plug before we go? There's going to be a link to the book. Just tell us the name specifically that people should search for and give us some info.
It's called Thank God for Bitcoin. And it's on Amazon. If you're Canadian, get it at amazon.ca. And for the Bitcoiners out there, it will have a website and you will be able to purchase it with Bitcoin, but it just literally got released. So we put it on Amazon first because it's not actually marketed towards you Bitcoiners out there because you're already on the team. So, but it is a good gift for your family and friends who are religious or are just interested in Bitcoin and the problems of our financial world today. So
awesome. Do you guys have it on Kindle or is it just a print version?
Both. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Cool. Can you gift somebody a Kindle version of something? I think you can, right?
I believe so. Yeah, I believe so.
All right. I like the idea of the gifting part, and I am including a link to the thing using the free Ross code. So you're doing two good things. You're donating a tiny little bit to get Ross out of jail finally, and also to show God that you love Bitcoin. So I think that's like a win-win. I like the affiliate links. So anything else? Thank you so much for making the time to join us today on the Tatiana Show. You're great.
Thank you. Fun. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
What's the point of all this technology without a little love in our lives? Our hosts, Tatiana Moroz, Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and Lauren Kasovitz have come together to bring you Proof of Love. Go to proofoflovecast.com. The Tatiana Show has been brought to you by CryptoMediaHub.com, a boutique marketing and PR agency for Bitcoin and beyond. Hey there, it's time for the show, the Tatiana Show, where you make friends and talk life and crypto. We gotta think and reflect and use lots of intellect with our hearts when we work together. I know that it can be so hard out there, looking all around and saying that life ain't fair. So that is why we will fight and stay up late at night, listening to the Tatiana Show. Thank you for listening to the Tatiana Show. Please follow us on Twitter at Queen Tatiana or on Facebook and Instagram at Tatiana Moroz Music. More episodes can be found at thetatianashow.com, and make sure you leave a review on iTunes and tell your friends. You are listening to The Tatiana Show. This show may contain adult content, language, and humor and is intended for mature audiences. If that's not you, please stop listening. Nothing you hear on The Tatiana Show is intended as financial advice, legal advice, or really anything other than entertainment. Take everything you hear with a grain of salt. Oh, and if you're listening to us on an affiliate network, the ideas and views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of the network that you're listening on or of any sponsors or any affiliate products you may hear about on this show.